Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is No Study at Dis. This episode of No Study at Dis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of No Study at Dis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ragen through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicola leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going to do it!
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
And Porter says, cheated!
You want to win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome to another edition of Nos Audietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Watson's Counter, and the Sounder at Heart subscribers. This is episode 446, and we're recording on Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our producer, Lickett. Well, much to our chagrin, the Seattle Sounders will be playing a Game 3 in their best-of-3 series after falling to FC Dallas 3-1 on Saturday. The match started off pretty much disastrously, with Dallas getting 2 goals inside 20 minutes. To their credit, the Sounders played much better over the next 70 minutes until a Jackson Ragen giveaway allowed Dallas to score an ultimately meaningless insurance goal. During those 70 minutes, though, Jordan Morris looked about as good as he's ever looked, scoring 1 goal, having another waved off for a questionable offside, and just giving the Dallas defense all sorts of fits. There was also a penalty not given despite VAR's recommendation, and a few other good chances for the Sounders to equalize. So a disappointing result, but not an entirely disastrous performance. I thought there were some encouraging elements in that loss. Am I being too naive, Aaron?
I don't think so. I think we kind of talked before the game about, the realities of Dallas is not a bad team, even though I think the Sounders are a better team. It wouldn't be shocking for Dallas to come out with a win. I thought we were going to really get our opinion about we'd rather lose in regulation than in penalties. We're really going to get that put to the test there for a while because I really thought the Sounders were going to get that second goal.
Yeah.
And I really thought that if they got that second goal and there was enough time, I just felt like they were going to get the third goal. The momentum was definitely in their, on their side of the pitch. I think that after that last one, the one that was cleared off the line, the last real big chance that the Sounders had, I kind of felt like that was that. Like they were just sort of spent. And I think that, really kind of explains that last goal. That was just, I think, a pretty bad mental error that an exhausted player that's kind of been under a lot of pressure all game, is going to make it.
Yeah. And I think even beyond that, it was a situation where there wasn't really a lot of value in Ragen just kind of clearing the lines there.
Yeah.
And so he's playing in a way that is more like, look, if we don't score here, it doesn't really matter what happens.
Right. There's no aggregate coming into play. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And, the things that led to the Sounders being in that kind of a hole, I don't think are going to be repeating themselves. I don't think they're likely to spend the first 20 to 30 minutes of the game completely under siege. I don't think that Dallas is likely to get out to a big lead again. And I think the Sounders have, to bolster themselves. Hey, we were in this hole and we almost came back and got a result, at least got the second goal. I think looked like the better team. I also don't expect Nuhu to repeat that performance that he had, especially for the first 20 minutes. And God, I hope not, because I think it's an oversimplification to say Nuhu is the reason the Sounders lost this game. That's not fair to Nuhu. It's also not accurate, but sort of, contradictory to that. I don't know that the Sounders lose that game if he doesn't have the 20 minutes that he had.
Yeah, and he was pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the the penalty that was probably the most glaring mistake that he made. That, for a moment there, it looked like he might get away with, but he didn't close down Kumungo on the cross that led to Ariola's goal. He really is not anywhere near him. And then he also had a foul at the top of the penalty area, kind of a bad foul that he gets a yellow card for. And then he kicks the ball away. Very lucky not to get a second yellow there.
Yep.
And there was a time when he could have gotten a yellow on the penalty too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 3 or 4 years ago, before they sort of changed the rules around double jeopardy, he probably does get a second yellow there. I think there's a good chance in a regular season game he does get a second yellow for kicking the ball away. I think that it was so egregious that the broadcast crew, who, I mean, I'll take pretty much anything those guys say with a grain of salt, but the broadcast crew basically was just working under the assumption that the yellow was for kicking the ball away.
Right.
Because that's supposed to be an automatic yellow.
Right.
And it's not like he just sort of he booted the thing.
He did.
Yeah, extremely, extremely lucky.
While also giving all the gesticulations.
Right. For a very, very obvious foul. I mean, that's the thing is when I saw that, I said, well, he can't react that way, but this has to have been a bad call, right? And then they show the replay and it's like, no, that's
hands
as much of a foul as it gets. Yeah.
It was very bad. And I guess if there's positives to be taken from this is that for as bad as the Sounders looked, and they looked like really, they did not look good at all for those first 20 minutes.
No.
They settled down for the rest of the first half. And then at the start of the second, they had Dallas on the ropes.
Yeah.
After Morris's goal, he comes back and he scores again almost, relatively quickly. And I don't know. I guess I trust that he was offside because I want to believe there was a better angle of the call than what we got on the broadcast. But from what we saw on the broadcast, it's borderline. It's like one of those things where if it had been called, if the flag had stayed down, I don't know that VAR would have overturned it. And I don't know. And it should be said, it was a great pass by João Paulo. It was a really nice finish, but Morris was all over the place. He was using his speed in ways that we haven't really seen him use it this year. Like even when he's looked good, he hasn't been running behind defenses as much as he was running behind in this one. I thought that was really encouraging. And I think just in general, the play was better on my rewatch than it was in the initial watch, because at the initial watch, especially the first half, it felt really flat.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And I think there's, Grant, I would definitely rather have won, but if there's one game that they could afford to lose, this was it. I can live with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there was a lot to see in that game that you can feel really positive about going into the second leg. I think Jordan, for me, down the stretch has really, I don't think that this is a popular opinion, and I'm not sure that this is the way the Sounders are going to go with it. But what he brings to the center forward position, I think in the system with the way the Sounders are playing now was really on display in this game. And it makes me wonder is that really the best place to spend resources? Can you just go out there with him as your 9? That goal that he scored, the one that actually stood up, which was initially flagged offside and called back, which was a really shocking call because it was very obviously a back pass.
And honestly, I'm not even sure he was offside, even if it wasn't a back pass.
I don't think he was, which does make me a little more skeptical that the offside call.
Right.
But I digress. I don't want to sound like, FC Dallas's coach after the first game, but I just, that goal that he scored that stood is a goal that there aren't that many strikers in MLS that can score. There are strikers that can do things that he can't, but that is something that very few people besides Jordan can do, because he has the speed, he has the ability to read the game, he has the work rate, and he has the strength to hold off guys. And that was a nice, tidy finish from a difficult angle.
Yeah. He totally fooled Pause on that too. Like Pause is clearly not expecting a near post finish, and he's completely caught off And he had actually covered the near post reasonably well. I just don't think he expected it to come in as hard and as tight to the post as it did.
Yeah.
It was a really impressive play. And Ibiaga is not a small guy. He's not a slow guy. And Morris just sort of manhandled him throughout that game. And so that, I think, just Jordan Morris in general, but broadly, it's funny because this narrative has been around for a few weeks at least, that Morris had a really hot start, but he really, ever since that hot start, he's cooled off a lot. And it's true, he did cool off for a period after the hot start, but really ever since he scored that first goal, which was against New York. He had that goal against New York where he got hurt. Ever since then, I think he has 6 goals in his last 14 games. It's 6 goals in 825 minutes or something like that. That's a goals per 90 of 0.55 goals per 90. That's you put that up for a season and you're among the league leaders. He's gonna, he's on 14 goals across all competitions right now. That ties his career high. And it ties his career high in 1,000 less minutes than he needed to score that many in 2016, which was his rookie year.
Yep.
I mean, Morris, it's funny. I still keep getting kind of messages from people saying oh, the Sounders really need to move on from Morris.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I would also say that Jordan Morris's hot start, what position was he playing? He was playing center forward.
Yeah.
Jordan Morris down the stretch when he's turned it back on, what position was he playing? He was playing center forward. His best years before Raul got here, spent a lot of time at striker. Raul gets here, he moves out to the wing. He's a different player. He's still a very valuable player, but he hasn't been playing his sort of career downturn, if you want to call it that, corresponded with him having to move out to the wing to make space for Raul. I don't think that any of this is an accident. And I understand why the Sounders did that, why they played him on the wing. And I think he contributed really well at that position. It was the right thing to do. But when you have the 2023 Raul and not the 2018, 2019 Raul, you got to put Jordan in that spot because I just think he's at his very best there, especially at this phase in his career.
Well, and not to get too not to get too beyond where we are. We have a big game coming up on Friday, and I don't want to lose sight of that. But we're on the subject. I don't think the Sounders have not started a season. I don't think since 2017, when Jordan was sort of the number one choice as the number 9. In 2017, it should be said, he struggled with injuries a lot that year. He played through a lot of injuries and he had a really bad season. Yeah. He showed, if you remember, he showed a lot of positive stuff in that season, but not scoring. He had his worst scoring season. But at this point where we sit right now, I'm inclined to bring him back next year as the default number 9, especially if you have Leo Chu back next year as well. And maybe you sign a young number 9 and sort of groom him to be, to succeed, to be the successor at that position. But I don't think you go out and get a veteran 9. I want to see Morris. I kind of want to see what Morris will do, especially the reality is that he might not be in the national team picture too much anymore. We might not be losing, he lost the part of the reason his stat line is so, is not as more impressive is that he missed 6 games for the Gold Cup.
Yeah, his rate stats this year are quite good.
Right,
I mean, he's been a very good player. He's been the best. He's been the Sounders' best attacking player. I think it's pretty reasonable to say, depending on what you consider Christian to be. And I don't think I would consider him to be an attacking player. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He's had a very good year, and I think if you look at the rate stats, the per 90 stats versus his all up numbers, but even his all up numbers have been pretty good considering how much time he spent playing on the wing in a deeply dysfunctional attack.
Yeah, exactly. Other than that, I think at first I thought that the Sounders were probably going to maybe make 1 or 2 changes to the lineup. But after rewatching the game, I'm less inclined to think that I could maybe see them bringing in Ladero for Chu. But based on what Schmetzer said at training today, it sounded like they're going to go with the same lineup. And I can't really blame him. Chu has been relatively ineffective in this series, I think, in part because Tomasi, the right back for Dallas, really is able to match Chu's speed, which once you match Chu's speed, that's really his differentiating factor. But I don't mind rolling it out there again, and if it's not working, you can bring Ladero on at halftime, really, if you needed to. But
yeah, I think that there's an argument to be made that Nico is. I understand the argument for Nico, and he was quite good, I thought, against FC Dallas, even though in the second leg, even though I did feel like the Sounders were less dominant after he came on, but I don't think that was anything to do with him. I think that was just kind of the way it shook out.
Yeah, and he came pretty close to contributing to 3 goals.
Yeah.
He had a really nice sort of flick to knew who to put him in. He had that really nice nutmeg to put Obed in on the ball that Obed slid across to Raul, and then he had that free kick that led to the scramble in front of the goal where the ball ended up getting cleared off the line. Yeah, which was a good free kick.
Yeah, he did. He played really well. I don't think it had that sort of, at least perceived by me, drop off. I don't think that had anything to do with him. I think it just kind of them running out of gas. But I do think that my concern remains that can the Sounders play the way they've been most effective down the stretch with him starting? And I'm just not sure that they can. I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to have Nico be the change and have that be sort of the X factor that gets them over the hump. But I don't know. Even though Leo is not great in the first game, I don't see any reason to change what worked so well in that first game, I guess.
Yeah, I was a little worried, frankly, that maybe he was going to overreact and pull out Atencio because he thought Atencio was too high up the pitch. And I have to admit, as someone who's not doing the game planning, when I rewatched the game, I thought Atencio actually looked pretty good. He was high up the pitch, but it felt like it was more by design, and it wasn't like, it didn't seem to me that he was getting pulled out of position, although there were maybe a couple times where he was. I like what Atencio brings still, even when he's not at his most effective. And I'm kind of glad that Schmetzer is going to stick with this lineup that has really been pretty good over the last, 6 to 10 games.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just don't think anything that happened in Dallas is grounds for overreacting, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, I feel like the Sounders are still clearly the better team. I think they showed that in this game, that they outplayed Dallas. And I don't think this was a game where the game state dictated that Dallas just kind of set back, and that the Sounders were threatening in a major way against the Dallas team who was not happy to just absorb pressure.
Right. And they got that goal early enough in the second half, where it was like the 47th minute or something, where at that point Dallas just couldn't afford to sit on a lead.
Absolutely.
That said, anything Dallas is doing, like, it's funny. There's been a lot of chatter, I feel like, about the Dallas press, and the Sounders have sort of given some of that credence. But man, they've had a couple turnovers that led to chances, but I just have not seen them struggling to handle the press as much as they've had some bad turnovers against the press.
Teams that press as much as Dallas does will create turnovers. It's inevitable. It's going to happen unless you completely take the air out of the ball, or put the air back in the ball, I guess, actually. They want the Sounders to do things that they're not comfortable doing. They want them to play direct and go long instead of building the way that they're more comfortable doing. And the Sounders aren't going to do that because they shouldn't do that. They should play the way that they are most effective playing. And so, there's going to be some turnovers and bad spots. You have to minimize the damage from those turnovers. They did a good job of that in the first game. They didn't do as good a job of that in the second game. But if you're playing into what Dallas wants you to do with that press, you don't score, I think, either goal that they got in the first game. You don't score the goal Jordan scored. You don't score the goal Jordan scored that got called back. You don't create the kind of situation where Raul's getting dragged down in the box. It's just, you've got to take the good with the bad. They just need to tidy things up a little bit in the back. And I don't expect Jackson Ragen to make a pass as bad as the one he made for the third goal. Yeah. I don't think the press had anything to do with Nuhu giving away that penalty. I think that that first goal, Nuhu just needs to close down, and Ragen needs to not be 3 yards deeper than the rest of the defensive line, and that's probably not a goal. So I do think, there are points in time when the Sounders have been under pressure because of Dallas's press, but I think the extent to which that was directly the contributing factor to Dallas scoring those 3 goals, I think is pretty wildly overstated.
Yeah. So the other part of this game that I feel like we need to at least talk about a little bit is the penalty that was not ultimately called, but VAR had recommended for it to be a penalty. I have mixed feelings on it, but what was your take on that whole situation?
I think it's a foul in the box and it's a clear penalty. I know that the argument is there's no way he's getting to that ball. I don't care. I do not care. It's a foul in the box. Maybe he's getting to that ball if he's not being held outside the box.
Or maybe he's causing the goalkeeper to drop it, or he's putting pressure on.
Right.
Whatever
or maybe the keeper does drop it.
Right.
Like, it's irrelevant. Like, you can't, it is not the referee's job to say, well, if X then Y, potentially Z, so therefore it's not a penalty. It's the referee's job to say, that's a foul, it's in the box.
Right.
My assumption is that it's a combination. I didn't see if there was the question was asked in the post game, so I don't know if the referee gave an explanation, but my assumption is it's a combination of he wasn't going to get to the ball and he embellished.
I mean, all we know is what Brian told us, the referees told him, and that they told him that it was just a matter of they didn't feel like he was going to get to the ball, or the referee didn't feel like he was going to get to the ball. And I guess just on some level that's fair. And I guess where my mixed emotions come is I agree with you. It should be a penalty. And I don't really understand. I don't feel like the logic is sound for not calling it a penalty.
No, it's not.
Yet there's part of me that isn't feeling too aggrieved because it wasn't a situation where the Sounders did a lot to earn that penalty, right?
Right.
And so it was, it would have been kind of a cheap penalty. Of course, I would have taken it, and I wish they had gotten it. But I don't know. I guess.
I mean, I know what you mean. It's like, it's not satisfying to think about because it's like, well, it's not like they really put themselves in a great position to earn that penalty. But
right.
FC Dallas, I mean, the Nuhu penalty was not.
Agreed.
Just a terrible foul in a spot where there's not a lot of danger. And I mean, I don't, so it's just like a foul's a foul. If it's in the box, it's a penalty. And I get the perspective of it's not something I'm going to dwell too much on because it's not like it was this grave miscarriage of justice that undid good play. Like, totally get that. And I think it's why I'm not as pissed off about it as probably the egregiousness of how bad the call was, because ultimately, I mean, that probably wasn't that great of a chance. But
at the same time, a lot of penalties get called that aren't great chances.
Yes.
In fact, probably more that aren't great chances than that are.
Yes.
So it should have been a penalty. I really don't understand that. I really am kind of bothered by the logical exercise they had to do, which was effectively create a standard in real time.
It's not pass interference.
Right. It's not exactly. That's the thing is that it's not the pass interference rule.
Yeah. I mean,
and it sort of is, and it is sort of rewarding the defender. Like, Ferreira, what's he doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Like, why are you grabbing a jersey?
It's a really bizarre play to make because I mean, even if for me, I know that defenders a lot of the time feel like, well, it's better to give away a penalty than, and hope that they miss the penalty and then give away a clear goal. But it's not like, even if he doesn't have a great read and doesn't know for sure that Raul is not going to get there, it's not close enough to me that the penalty is the clear play. Like, he's at full sprint at the far post. Like, that's still going to be a really difficult finish, even if there's a good chance he gets there.
Yeah.
Just really, really poor defending. And I agree. Like, I think that it's letting the defender off the hook for a really poor challenge. And I feel like if you can get a penalty for clipping somebody's heels as they are dribbling away out of the box to recycle play, which we have seen given against
many times,
then then there's no reason that can't be a penalty as well. Because if the standard is this a goal dangerous play, the number of penalties is going to go down by like 50%.
Right. Which honestly, I would be okay with that being
I would too.
The standard, if that's they want to universally change it to.
Yeah.
And somehow create some other like a indirect free kick or something.
Yeah.
For of course, that's just adding more judgment calls, but whatever.
Right.
Anyway, it was a frustrating night, and that was, I think it was sort of indicative of the way that Dallas felt like they were on their heels because they were doing kind of panicky things like grabbing players in the box.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I guess that all gives me hope. And honestly, if they advance out of 3 games, and that's a big if, like they have a big task ahead of them to win this game. But there is definitely part of me that's looking at this a couple different ways. One is, if you told me the Sounders would have a chance to advance from any round of the playoffs with a home game, just by winning a home game, I'd take those chances, right? Like like that's what you sign up for. And if they can't win this one, then, I guess maybe they weren't going to do anything. But the other part of me is honestly saying, like, if they advance from this, they have 2 weeks off. I'd rather have 2 weeks off, frankly, than 3 weeks off.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I don't know that it's that much of anyone's benefit. It's a benefit to not have to play a third game in the sense that you've already advanced, but I don't know that the extra week is actually good in terms of the rest.
Yeah, I don't feel like the Sounders are in a position where you've got guys that are super banged up and need, Reed Baker Whiting, I think, is the only guy that's still sort of questionable that
right, but
isn't.
But the extra week, I don't think is going to make a difference.
Yeah, it's especially because I think the hope is that he'll be ready for this game.
Right, exactly. Like he should be available for this game.
Yeah, so I'm kind of with you, and I just, the Sounders, this last game aside, the Sounders have been playing so well that I feel like you do definitely want to sort of try to strike while the iron is hot. I'm just looking at the numbers for this game, and I did not know how significant the Sounders' possession advantage.
Yeah, it was pretty significant.
Yeah. Anyway, not like that matters that much, but boy, that's frustrating in hindsight. I am with you though. I'd rather win at home anyway, and that's
another way. But yeah.
If I felt like the Sounders were gonna steamroll their way through the playoffs, this game probably would have bothered me a lot more.
Yeah,
but I just never expected that. Like,
right.
The Sounders are a good but flawed in a lot of ways team, and it's probably not going to be a walk in the park. But that doesn't mean that they're not capable of still getting to a final.
Right. So. Right. Again, and none of this means that losing this game was preferable, but it just speaks to, I think, the idea that, this is kind of the way it was going, and I'm not totally blown away by the fact that the Sounders have to win. But hey, again, you have a winnable home game against the 7th best team in the West. Just take care of business.
Yeah.
Just take care of business. All right. Well, I think we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. I want to talk about this Phil Neville thing. I realize it's gauche to talk about the Timbers on this podcast, but I was laughing about the whole situation all day today.
Yeah.
And I just want to talk about it a little bit more. We'll probably talk about a few other things. You're listening to Nos Audiatis. Watson's Counter wants to thank everyone for their patience, but now the wait is over. Located at 6420 24th Avenue Northwest in Ballard, they've reopened in a brand new location with the same bomb-ass coffee and the same dumbass vibes. You can still expect their classics like the gochujang fried chicken sandwich and Fruity Pebbles French toast, alongside their new soft serve program and their world-class coffee. Make sure to follow them on Instagram for all the latest and greatest. Welcome back to Nos Audiatis. So, a few things going on in the soccer world of MLS, the MLS world. The one that's nearest and dearest, I think, to our hearts, may as well get out of the way first, Phil Neville was hired as the new head coach of the Timbers, and the news leaked over the weekend, and Timbers Army basically released a statement before it was even official, basically saying this is a horrible hire. And they looked at a bunch of his tweets from 2011 where he said some really, frankly, horrible things. I think they were so horrible that I have to believe they were like in jest, but these horrible things about women in the workplace and all these kind of things. And he's apologized for it, but I mean, he's acknowledged they were really bad statements, I guess. Apologize. Right. Maybe apologize is the wrong word, but yeah, you're right. Maybe he has acknowledged they were really bad taste. And anyway, he gets hired. They announced the hiring on Monday. And the thing that just brought it home for me is they put out all this social media content around it. The one that I just could not let go of was this. They did this video that I guess is based on like a TikTok trend where it's like they play around with the foreground and the background and they make it look like you're jumping over a building kind of thing. But they did it in the most awkward way possible where they catch him talking to the cameraman saying ready, and then he's like awkwardly like stepping over this thing, and then the back they're holding the camera, and so it's not lining up properly, and it's just like a complete mess of a video that is totally nonsensical. Everything about it is poorly executed on every way. It's nonsensical. It doesn't have any relation to what's going on, like the announcement itself. And people are already mad. That's the like underscoring all this. People already are mad. And it's not just that he had these these very bad tweets in 2011. It's that his coaching record is absolutely not impressive at all.
No, it's when you look at his career record, I think he's got something like a 48% win percentage or something.
44%.
Yeah. And
even worse.
And a lot, like the bulk of that is with England women, where he won.
Maybe if you're including England. Yeah. Okay. Maybe
so he won a little over half of his games with England women. He talks about how he turned the program around. He takes all this credit. The same group of players are now under their new coach. She's won like 75% of her games. They're one of the best teams in the world. So it's like,
and, by the way, he got fired from that job.
Right, he did. And it's like you're taking credit for by all appearances, based on what's happened since you left, dramatically underachieving with that group of players. And like, you know, the Miami situation, the cards were a little bit stacked against him. That team was in pretty rough shape, but nothing he did was like, sometimes you see a coach who doesn't have a great group of players, but you can see what they're trying to do. And you feel like, man, you know, if this guy had the horses, or when this team matures a little, like you can see what's going on. You can see the direction. I never saw that with Inter Miami. It's just like, we're just going to go out there. And like, you can just tell some coaches just are out of their depth no matter where they are, because they don't have any real ideas other than, well, I was good at this, so when I was playing.
Right.
So if they just listen to me, they'll be fine. And that just really does kind of seem like his whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I thought what was funny about the whole situation is that, you know, it would be one thing if he had done, like, if the Timbers were just a random organization and they hired a guy that, you know, some people dug up some questionable things that he said. And ultimately, though, you look at his resume and you go, yeah, but this guy's worth, it's about what he's going to bring on the field, right?
Right.
So you're willing to overlook some of this other stuff. But the Timbers have already like lost all the trust of their fans.
Yeah.
Over the course of several years of mishandling all sorts of situations. And then they just kind of go into this as if they are dealing from a place of like respect with their fans.
Right.
And it's just a total mess. I mean, who knows? It's entirely possible that Phil Neville could end up being a decent coach for them. I do think it's very funny though that they brought on all this guy with all this baggage who has a worse winning percentage than John Spencer.
Yeah.
The guy they fired
Yeah.
in year 2.
Even if this hire ends up working out somehow, and I'm just really skeptical that that's going to be the case, it's a crazy decision. They will be so lucky if it ends up working out.
Yeah.
And it just really does feel like Merritt just stopped really giving a shit. Like he just does not seem invested at all. It's just like, oh, this is a famous guy. I used to watch him. Let's give him the job. Like,
Right.
I don't know, man, which is great for me, but also like a little bit depressing. And I hope it's a total disaster and everyone involved
Yes, absolutely.
loses their jobs. It would be great.
So elsewhere in MLS, there were a couple situations with referees that got kind of dicey, I think is maybe a good way of putting it. So if you were watching the FC Cincinnati New York Red Bulls game, you may have noticed that Matt Miyazaga got a second yellow card during the shootout when he did the heart hands and kisses to the Red Bull supporters. And he claims, he grew up playing for Red Bulls Academy, and these are maybe people that theoretically he feels some kinship with. But knowing Matt Miyazaga, that does not seem to be what the motivation most likely was. This is a guy who...
There's no way.
Right. This is a guy who has 11 yellow cards this year, only 3 of which are for soccer stuff.
Yeah.
He is a troll. And I don't think, maybe it was an overreaction for the referee to show him that yellow card. But it is funny that yellow card now means that he's suspended because it was his 3rd yellow card of the round. He's now suspended for the conference semifinals. But then, as if that wasn't bad enough, he apparently went to the referee's locker room and sort of insisted on having a conversation with the referees. Now, the way that it was told through the PSRA, which is the referee union, he barged in and had to be pulled out by security. There's another version of events where he kind of did not necessarily barge in and he was walked away by a member of the comm staff. Either way, what are you doing? Yeah. You do not go to the referee's locker room. Under no circumstances should you go to the referee's locker room. What good can possibly come of that?
It's some unhinged stuff, man. And it's the explanation. It's like, oh, I used to play for Red Bulls, and that was a genuine expression of the most do not insult my intelligence kind of like, come on, man. If he were, honestly, I don't know if there's a single player in the world who if they did that in that specific situation, that is not the time you salute the fans of your boyhood club. After you've
eliminated them.
Yeah, that's just not, I don't believe you for a second, but especially with his track record.
Right.
And I can't believe that I'm siding with the referees over a player, but I think that their version of events is probably a lot closer to the truth.
Yeah, and it's like I think the thing is that you can take issue with the yellow card and whatever else, but there's no excuse, and it doesn't even matter what he should not be in the locker room. I honestly think that it would be perfectly reasonable to suspend him for the rest of the postseason.
Yeah, I think so. They're just, whatever you think about the standards for your behavior, like the standards of behavior for interacting with referees.
Right.
And there are some FC Cincinnati fans online who have some really extremely normal opinions about what those standards should be that were out in full force today. It's pretty well established that you can't do something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just, I remember Pat Noonan in his post-game press conference was like, oh, Matt knows better. Are you sure, bro? Right. Are you sure that he knows better? Because there's every appearance that he does not know better at all.
And then he also kind of casually mentioned that they might appeal. And I'm just like, what grounds are you going to appeal on?
Right. Yeah, because that's not a
he shouldn't have been I don't know. I don't even know what the appeal, on what grounds are you appealing this? You don't appeal, you can't appeal yellow cards.
Yeah. And I think especially after he tried to fight the referees, that maybe
maybe that's not going to go too well. Like, maybe just shut up. Just take your punishment.
Yeah, and it's funny too because it's like he's a really important player for them.
Yeah, I mean, he might win Defender of the Year. Not that he deserves it, but
no. But I mean, that's a team whose defense is good, not like elite. But missing. I mean, he's a big piece of that defense.
Oh yeah.
They're pretty ordinary without him, so it could really end up biting him.
It would be very funny.
It would be extremely funny.
So the other referee situation was another one where, on some level, you can understand why everyone was mad. So Tim Ford was the referee in Vancouver on the Vancouver LAFC game. He called a very questionable penalty that was the only goal in the game that ultimately got Vancouver eliminated. And then on basically the last play of the game, he essentially screened a Whitecaps player that allowed LAFC to go on a break. They score. VAR points out that it was offside. It gets overturned, whatever. But Vanni Sartini just absolutely loses his mind and is yelling and screaming. He's walking off the field, kicking the ad boards, doing all this kind of stuff. And everyone's loving it. And then in the post-game press conference, he gives what I fully trust was a completely in jest, trying to make light of himself comment about, it would be something. Do you remember exactly what he said?
I don't remember exactly, but it was basically along the lines of like, man, I really hope Tim Ford isn't found floating face down in a creek tonight because I'll be the prime suspect. Something like that.
Right. Yeah, it was exactly. It was something like that. And it's like, I get it. You're trying to make fun of yourself. You're trying to say how mad you were. But this is such an inappropriate way to joke about a referee. And again, PSRA came out and saying, like, what the fuck are you doing?
It's such a funny thing to say that I think that I think there's a really good chance that this is a cultural, like, lost in translation kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I believe that.
And I like Vanni a lot, so I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But you can't say that, man. It's a really funny thing to say. Like, it's almost like there are politicians that I think are abhorrent, but they say really funny things, and it's like, look, you can't say that, but you did, and it's really funny that you said that. And this is kind of a similar thing where it's like, he should probably be suspended. He should definitely be fined, but it's very funny. It's a very funny thing to say. So I appreciate it, even though I can't endorse it.
Yeah. But I guess this is all just sort of a reminder that referees make mistakes.
Yeah.
They are sometimes not particularly good at their job, but I think we have to sort of let go of this idea that referees are purposefully making mistakes or calling things against your team. Like there was also a lot of people in the Sounders game really worked up about the AR who called Morris offside both times on the goal that he did score and the one that he that got waved off. And yes, that she did it twice in the span of like 7 minutes does imply like it does feel like she really didn't want Jordan to score goals in this game.
Right.
But I don't think that's what's going on here.
I don't think so. I think you've got to be smart enough as a sports fan to recognize. I think that in the moment, pretty much whatever you want to say is fine. Like, whatever. It's just stream of consciousness.
I do it too.
But people who like hold these weird grudges afterwards, that's where it gets weird, because it's just like, what about Jordan Morris do you think this AR is so pissed off about? What about Matt Miazga do you think Pro got together and decided? Because there are people who straight up think there is a conspiracy against Matt Miazga specifically. What? Like, what is it about him? Is it all of the stuff he does that's against the rules? And that's the thing is it's like, well, people will be like, well, the referees don't like this player because, he gets under their skin. And it's like, oh, you mean because he does things that are like against the rules.
Right.
So they're more, maybe he should stop doing those things.
Right.
It's a very funny way. It's a very like middle school way of thinking about things, because it's just like you're not that special. And
No.
MLS refs are, I think, of all the leagues in the world, the standard between refereeing and play on field is like most in line in MLS.
Yeah.
Like Premier League level play is super good. Refs are awful. Sub MLS.
Right. The gap is easily the biggest in England.
Yeah. And like MLS, it's pretty good refs, pretty good standard of play.
Yeah. Like we don't have the best refs, but we definitely, I would say we probably have refs that are like relatively speaking more closer to the top 10 in the world than our league is.
I think anybody who watched MLS in 2011, 2012, the back in them days, and still has the opinion that the referees are atrociously bad, just probably hates referees as a concept, which is, fair enough. But
we have to, I do think we have to keep it, like, we got to encourage more referees. That's the only way we get better. Yeah. Is like people have to want to be referees.
I have definitely come around on the belief, and it's one that I used to resist pretty strongly, but I think it's right, because we've seen what VAR actually looks like, and I think MLS does a much better job with VAR than most leagues. But I have kind of come around to the idea that it's just like, look, the referees aren't going to get every call right, and if it's close enough, like 98% of bad calls are not that big a deal, because it's close enough, right? Like it's and those 2%, like that's like, yeah, get super pissed about those. Get super pissed when Raul gets pulled down in the box and doesn't get the penalty call. But just like ultimately, most calls that go the wrong way have just such a marginal effect on the game, realistically, and it's part of the fabric of the game. Like you because when you do something like VAR, where the whole goal of it is to remove the human element, in a lot of ways it can make it even worse, because then you have these things that are inherently judgment calls that you're trying to quantify, and it leads to all sorts of big messes. And just like that human error or human standard of judgment of interpretation is just kind of part of the game. And it's much easier for me to deal with, like, well, that's just a judgment call, that's a 50-50 call, than something like that VAR call, or VAR no call in this case, where that seems like a very clear penalty. The ref gets another look at it on the recommendation of the VAR official and says, nah, that's more difficult for me.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely appreciate it. I still feel like I rest easier with VAR.
I do too. I think MLS, and especially in MLS. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a good example of that was the RSL Houston game, where Zach McMath was originally called off his line in the shootout when he stopped a attempted Panenka, where he just stood, held his ground and made the save. And they called him off his line, and then VAR or VAR or however we're going to call it, pointed out he was still on his line.
Yeah.
Which, that, like, for every call that we don't get the satisfaction of it going the way we want, there are certain calls like that are really cut and dry, where I'm like, no, this is exactly the reason we need this technology. But
yeah, I think that is like, that's the use case for it. That's the selling point. And what I appreciate about MLS is that they tend to keep it to those calls.
Right.
They don't tend to do all of this weird,
like, relitigating the entire
nitpicking things to a degree that it's like similar to how we're talking about millimeters for the difference between a first down and not a first down in football. Right. And that's just measured with some guys with a chain,
right,
who have all the potential in the world to lose track of where they're at, or it's all like spotted by the eye. But then it's like, wherever that chain is, now we got to get like 800 cameras out to, like,
right.
It's just this false precision that I think MLS generally does a pretty good job of avoiding.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you there. Well, that's probably a good place to call this a show. Thank you to all the Sounder at Heart subscribers that are making this possible. Thank you to Full Pull Wines. Thank you to Watson's Counter. Also, Watson's Counter for hosting that watch party. It was a lot of fun. Sorry you couldn't make it, Aaron, but we had a good turnout. 45-ish or so people came. It was a good time. So maybe we can have a better result, but can't control those things. Also, congratulations to OL Reign.
That's
for
right.
qualifying for the NWSL Championship game. Hopefully, we can convince our friends over at Coffee and Valkyries to throw together a podcast and they can dig into that one. But that's pretty cool.
Very cool.
This is their first championship game since 2015. They're going to be attempting to win the NWSL Championship for the first time, which would be a very fitting end to Megan Rapinoe's time.
Yep.
Or her career. But with all that said, I'm Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is No Sadietis. Remember, you will never yacht alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.